got in the middle of a culture war issue.
Fundamentally, the idea of having an all-electric Jaguar is pretty radical in the first place. They think that they've got nothing to lose. And they're getting talked about.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. We mentioned this right before the break. British car maker Jaguar facing a massive backlash for an ad campaign that doesn't feature its cars at all. I don't know if you guys have seen this. The ad features models dressed in bright colors. It's, to be honest, a little weird, the whole ad.
We don't normally talk about car sales on this podcast. We don't actually talk about ads that much. But we're going to talk about Jaguar. Not really for what it's done, but for what it has provoked. A massive backlash after this new, I don't know if you call it an ad, a tease, a moment, a video, which people just hate. And we're asking whether that signals success or failure.
Yeah, and is this something else? Is it something bigger that is going on now, which is a backlash against so-called woke capitalism, where companies are more worried about diversity, equity, inclusion than they are on their cherished brands, like a roaring Jaguar on the front of a testosterone-filled car? Welcome to the Newsagents. It's John.
It's Emily.
And the row over a pre-publicity advert for a new car, a Jaguar car, has become kind of taken on a life of its own. Millions of views on social media. It has become a talking point, a division point for people who are kind of thinking, this is terrible, this is the end of the world as we know it, because Jaguar are giving up years of tradition to try to win over an audience that shouldn't be theirs.
There's basically lots of different people, young people, different genders, different colours, wearing incredibly exuberant sort of outfits, you know, primary colours, bright primary colours, lots of reds and yellows and pinks. And at the centre of it is a rock rather than a car. And so some of the criticism has centred around this idea of like, why have you got a rock instead of a car? It's meant to be a Jaguar advert. And the response to that has been, because this whole thing is meant to be kind of breaking the mould. We're trying to get outside the traditional idea of whatever you think Jaguar looks and sounds like.
And of course, Jaguar is trying to kind of move with the change away from kind of the great V8 cars of yesteryear when they were kind of every kid's dream or whatever, to the electric vehicles of tomorrow. And so they try to do it differently. It looks like the Jaguar traditional logo of the Jaguar roaring at the front of the car is going to go as well. And one of those who, I don't know whether it will come as a surprise to you or not, who has taken against the Jaguar advert is one N. Farage, MP for Clacton-upon-Sea.
What is it with the modern advertising industry and big corporate companies? Think Jaguar. Think of the E-Type. Think of the powerful logo on the front of the car of Inspector Morse, of a really great British brand. Well, OK, it may now be owned by the Indians. But have a look at what the modern advertising industry have done. This is the new logo. I don't know what it stands for, do you? And the advert, showing some sort of almost non-human figures walking through a door without even showing cars. I'm not quite sure what they're saying or what they want to do. Strikes me as being another Bud Light moment. I predict Jaguar will now go bust. And do you know what? They deserve to.
I mean, it used to be called the Gin and Jag set of people who loved a Rothman cigarette, their Jaguar car, and a big gin and tonic.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that is sort of Nigel Farage. The problem is, you know, if Jaguar is to survive, the Gin and Jag set of Surrey and the home counties does not keep the company afloat. They have to be selling their cars in China, India and other places around the world where there is a burgeoning middle class who do want to have one of these prestige brands.
Isn't it also just about the cost, right?
Yeah,
because
they're expensive.
They're more than 100 grand. And if they're electric, they're probably much more than 100 grand. So who are you talking to anymore? Who are you actually talking to in this country? They're basically trying to stir things up. I mean, fundamentally, the idea of having an all-electric Jaguar is pretty radical in the first place. And I guess they've decided that with sales as they are, which are pretty minimal, they're selling 60,000 cars a year. That is a tiny, tiny percentage of what somebody like Mercedes or BMW is selling. So they're basically figuring that they're on a hiding to nothing unless they reinvent. But their reinvention has got a lot of people really hot under the collar. They don't like what they're seeing. They're calling it sort of woke capitalism. And the CEO, whose name is Rawdon Glover, has sort of pushed back and said, people love us for our history and our heritage, but that hasn't led to huge commercial success. The average age of the Jaguar client is quite old and getting older. We've got to access a completely different audience. So in a way, they think that they've got nothing to lose, and they're getting talked about.
Yeah, so it's got in the middle of a culture war issue.
Of course.
It's got caught up right in the crosshairs, and we can say, well, is this to do with the election of Donald Trump in America, that now sort of anti-woke capitalism
talking
is
about
on
taking
the
all
march.
the trans people out the army, out the military.
Exactly. It feeds into all of those things where you can see how a year ago there were noises about it, and there was a famous Budweiser ad for Bud Light which had a trans person talking about it, and people were so enraged that the bros in America got out their AR-15s and were posting videos of shooting cans of Bud because they hated it so much that the idea that kind of one of the legendary American macho brands should have a trans person advertising.
And it's so funny you use bros because, that was before we thought of bros as being an electoral force in the 2024 election, right? Which it now is. So arguably that was the response. That was the American response to the kind of stuff they were seeing. And I guess one of the questions we're going to ask today is whether marketing, advertisers, corporations themselves, in a sort of post-Trump victory world, feel scared off. Joining us now is Richard Huntington. He is the Chief Strategy Officer of Saatchi Saatchi, the ad brand that has been so closely related to political campaigning and marketing over decades, really. And I guess, Richard, the first question is, because I genuinely don't know the answer to this, is it a good ad?
I don't think it's a good ad, but I think that's because we're judging it as an ad, and I don't understand why we're judging it as an ad. Maybe they've said it's an ad. It seems to me to be what I would call a mood film. I mean, I really understand the position that Rawdon Glover is in, where he's desperately trying to...
this is the Jaguar CEO.
Yeah, to change the commercial realities of his organisation. And all of the sort of language that people have taken the piss out of, like copy nothing, I mean, actually, its design principles, they're really, really powerful. So I think we're judging it in profoundly the wrong way. But anything that an organisation creates today is by definition public and can be used in evidence against you.
And do you think they're happy with how it's landed?
Yes, I think they probably are.
Really?
Yeah, I do, because what I hear from him is a very clear understanding of his business strategy, the commercial realities that he is facing. I'm very reluctant to endorse the idea that any publicity is good publicity. It can be quite harrowing at times. The reality is everybody's going to be looking at that car.
This is the tease.
Yeah. But it's a tease. I think that's a better way to think of it, as a tease than an ad.
Yeah.
But if he's pleased with it, why does he go on to give an interview to the FT in which he says the level of vile hatred and intolerance in the comments regarding the video, individuals that appeared in the video, he thought was really unacceptable. That sounds like he was rather taken aback. Do you agree with that?
Well, yes, I do, and I have refused to engage with this subject. It's very tedious on LinkedIn. There's a lot of people giving their hot takes. The only time I engaged was, I think, somebody supporting the designer who was being attacked online, and I think.
And we haven't seen the car yet. That's the designer of the actual car.
No, the design of the rebrand.
Okay.
Yeah. And I thought that is what he's talking about. The MD's talking about is to attack the people responsible.
Sure.
For creating this rather than to attack him.
Do you think that when they are drawing up something as radical as that, and you may not own a Jaguar car, I never have owned a Jaguar car, but there is the Jaguar.
You had 7.
I know, I was lying. That the symbol, And the symbol is going to go. Do you think there are people who are drawing up the ad, as Emily says, I'm not in advertising either, that are saying, whoa, dangerous, hang on, you're going to get accused of this, you're going to get accused of that, you're going to get accused of being too woke. Would there be someone there doing the smell test on it all?
Well, in an advertising agency, there would be people like me. I'm a planner or strategist, and my job is to ensure the work connects with people. And there would be that person who is not responsible for the budget or for the timing, who is constantly monitoring the work to make sure it connects. I don't know whether this was produced in-house or in an agency, but again, I'd say it feels to me more like an internal mood film that's got onto the internet because everything gets onto the internet, rather than this is the ad that will launch the new Jaguar mark.
And what the CEO said, Rawdon Glover said, in response to the outrage was, I'm slightly paraphrase, it's fine if Nigel Farage doesn't like this. I don't want him to buy the cars. I mean, actually, when you look at the numbers, very few people buy Jaguars, right? I mean, 60,000 cars they sell on average a year, compared to sort of 2 million in the other luxury fields like Mercedes or BMW. So I guess one of the arguments is, Jesus, they had to do something. Are they trying to push the Nigel Farage's, I'm not singling him out, but only because Rawdon does, but are they trying to push that sort of demographic of person away?
No, I don't think so. I think, he's made a very clear decision that his future, or the future of Jaguar, is going to have one. Remember, they're making a loss on every single model bar one, is to super premium price it, sell fewer cars and make a profit for Jaguar Land Rover. And you need to sell relatively few. I think there's something like 2.5 million luxury car buyers on Earth. Yeah. So we're talking about a tiny target audience who extraordinary. I mean, to be that wealthy, you have to be quite an extraordinary and unusual person. So I would say that radical works in cars and retro never works. And we saw what happened to Rover when they thought that their brand was a retro brand, and it's disappeared. And I think you can look back maybe 10 years and see that Jaguar thought it was a retro brand. So you can't keep on going backwards. You can't go backwards. The DNA, the equity in the mark, that's important. Yeah. But you need to update it. And for me, every single CEO right now is panicked about how do I stay relevant, because the business world is full of the brands and businesses that have gone by the wayside.
So what is this about? What is this? Is this row about macho and you want cars to be testosterone filled and make a roaring engine noise and don't mess with that? Or is it about nationalism, that how dare, if you're going to mess with Jaguar, what is next? We've had the Union Jack, we've got Jaguar cars.
Or I would add, is it about an age demographic? I mean, is it much simpler than that the people who use the word woke tend to be older and whiter, and I mean not always, but the sort of the slammers tend to be of an older generation, and this tease ad whatever is about younger buyers. I mean,
it's potentially about younger buyers. Are they just?
Is it a different cultural space they are trying to bring in?
I'm not entirely sure. I think they're really trying to say they're drawing a line under what Jaguar has been and produced over the last 20 years, let's say. Some of their buyers will be younger, and there are a lot of, around the world, a lot of young, very, very wealthy people. But to have $100,000 to spend on a car, there is an inevitability that those people will tend to be slightly older. And I think it's our misunderstanding of what a white 50-something bloke looks like these days, because I'm a white 50-something bloke. So many organisations are worried about an ageing demographic, and yet that's where the money is.
And they shouldn't be. You're saying they should be.
They should be respecting
the
people that. But you sell in this business. We sell aspiration. Remember, Harley Davidsons are bought by people like me, but the mythology of that brand is forged by the Hells Angels. That's the truth.
Okay, so this is absolutely. I find this absolutely fascinating, because it feels to me like there is a sort of crisis of confidence going on that maybe is linked to Trump's election victory, but it was there beforehand. DEI, and Bud Light putting out an advert or a social media clip with a trans person, and then you see online people with AR-15s shooting the Budweiser cans, and suddenly they're, an anti-woke brigade goes to war on social media, and now you've got Elon Musk saying about the Jaguar ad doesn't look like a car, and you've got others as well.
Can I throw in the Euros 2024
shirt?
The shirt where there was all that question about whether it was a proper, is it a proper Union Jack?
What do you think?
So I think there's a crisis in confidence in Britain. I think we're worried about whether there's anything about this country to be proud of. The lettuce thing still looms large in people's lives, i.e. we got to the point where we were a laughing stock around the world when our Prime Minister lasted less time than a lettuce. These things sort of pile up on us, and so when an icon of Britishness looks like it's lost the plot, then people get extremely worried, and I think that's okay. But what's more important than flying the flag is to make sure that British businesses and British jobs are used to create things that the world wants to buy. Because of those 2.5 million rich people, the very large majority will not be in this country. They will be in China and the US.
Let's turn it upside down and just go back to the DEI question.
Yes.
And obviously this is very recent, but there definitely feels like since the Trump victory, there is a backlash against the sort of the push, which maybe did get too much. Is everything got to be multiracial, multicultural, multigendered, all the rest of it? Do you think advertisers are now feeling scared to go there, or has it died?
It hasn't died. I don't think advertisers are scared to go there, because got to remember that in their corporate governance, their investors and analysts are looking at DE&I really closely, and their output, like their advertising, is going to be part of that. What I do worry a little bit about is what I call marketing's flight from reality, which is when your job as a marketer is to create aspiration, to create desire, to lead the consumer. But when you get so far ahead of where the majority of people are, I think it's almost like an army's supply lines getting too stretched. And I think we are seeing a little bit of a sort of bounce back on that.
So running ahead of public opinion.
Running ahead of public opinion, because of course what we know, and I hear it a lot when More in Common are talking on the show, that the body of opinion in Britain is incredibly moderate, and so when marketers create a world which doesn't look a lot like the one that people inhabit, albeit nobody wants to see their actual lives on the television, but they do want some sort of conduit back to their own reality. Relatability and understanding and empathy. And that's where we can get ourselves in trouble. And what tended to happen, I think, is that marketers, scared by the reality of what's going on in the world, they're asked by their organisation to tell them what's going on in the world and how to show up. And it's impossible to understand what's happening right now, that they have scurried off into a world. They have little terms like Gen Z to describe audiences, and they've made up this audience of young people that they say are into ethics and sustainability and to purpose, and then they create work for people who are into ethics, sustainability and purpose, and that's where I think it gets extremely stretched.
I mean, can we just bring in the latest Boots advert, the Christmas advert? So it's this sort of luxury kind of workshop with, lots of people running around. And that was Jaguar, who's, the Bridgerton actress, who's kind of the master, mistress, whatever, of ceremonies, directing everything from the centre. Yeah. Back to your question, back to your definition, is that relatable? And because Boots is the ultimate relatable brand, right? Superdrug and Boots have got to be the sort of,
I think it is relatable in the sense that it's hugely aspirational. It paints a picture of the Christmas that you're going to pull off in your mind's eye that's incredibly desirable. I think my problem with this ad is much more that the idea of a Mrs. Claus is quite cliched now. We've seen that a lot. And the idea of a sort of lazy Santa, when Boots did Here Come the Girls a decade ago, 15 years ago, they were telling that story. I would absolutely defend their right, however, to include everybody who shops in their ad. I think that's a ridiculous place to get to where we say, well, some people can't be included in advertising. I think, we've tried to do a lot over the last decade to improve representation on the screen, rather than to say these brands and businesses are not for you or you or you.
And it will continue. It
will
be scared
continue.
of.
It will continue. What I think is important, though, is that when you create work, that you understand what's actually going on in people's lives. That's the reason for the study that the program I've created called "What the is Going On," which is to try and bring reality back to marketers, and so that they understand how to connect with people.
I don't know whether you were trying to audition to get on this podcast by dropping an F-bomb. I mean, Mateless and I normally can do that very well. We can do that very well. We do it very well by ourselves. So just don't get above yourselves, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Richard, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in. Well, while you were sleeping, as they say, an extraordinary electoral result has emerged from a part of the world where, to be honest, nobody was expecting it. And that's in Romania, where an ultranationalist, a sort of hard right-winger, has come from seemingly nowhere, and he's now in pole position. This is the first round of the presidential elections, and the second one is a week on Sunday. And I think it is worth us just looking at this a little bit carefully, because it is the first European election since the Trump result. And Romania is back-to-back with Moldova, which you might remember went to the polls in October, and the sort of pro-Europe side came through. The pro-Europe referendum came through, and the president stayed in power there in a year where many incumbents have found themselves turfed out. She stayed in power on the back of, a pro-European stance. This guy, Calin Georgescu, is pro-Putin, or at least he's
Moscow friendly. He's pro-tariffs. He's anti-immigrant. He is much more aligned with Hungary's Viktor Orban and with Slovakia's leadership now. And I think it's really interesting to ask the question whether Trump has, as the Libs would say, given them a permission structure to vote hard right in Europe, because suddenly there is this sort of energy of make Eastern Europe great again. Well, I was going to say exactly that. Forget the MAGA movement. We've now got the MEGA movement in Eastern Europe. Make Eastern Europe great again. And ultranationalist, Moscow friendly, NATO sceptic.
Yeah.
There is a group of countries now that are sort of forming a bloc within the European Union.
Absolutely.
That really don't like an awful lot of what the European Union stands for. And it is a major challenge. And you had a lot of the big central bankers of France, of Germany, this weekend warning about sclerotic growth in the European Union.
Yeah.
There is no Franco-German motor driving a process forward. And the concerns that the fracturing that first started with Brexit could accelerate, with these countries now taking a view that they think, you know what, we don't like what the EU stands for.
Yeah, and I guess if you're in the EU, what you're looking at is whether Romania and what's happening in Romania, obviously the election result isn't complete. As I said, the runoff is not for another week, but this ultranationalist is in first place at the moment. What you're looking at is the election that happens in Germany in February. And whether, again, what is starting to emerge is a sense that the hard right are not so out of line with the majority of the views. We've seen the collapse of the Olaf Scholz government there. We've seen how he has tried to, in the last week or so, make these sudden calls to Putin. Oh, haven't spoken for 3 years, but suddenly he wants Putin on side. Why Romania is so critical is because it takes a vast number of Ukrainian refugees. And up till now, the Romanian government has been firmly on the side of supporting, the rights, the democratic freedoms of Ukraine. If this guy gets in power, what happens to those refugees? Romania and Poland are the single biggest holders of Ukrainian refugees at the moment. And I think that is all thrown into a bigger picture of how Eastern Europe starts to deal with Russia.
Look, the hope will be that what Romania does on December the 8th is replicate what happened in France in 2002, where you're suddenly left with the hard right versus the centre right. Centre right was Jacques Chirac, hard right was Jean-Marie Le Pen, and 82% of people voted for Jacques Chirac rather than Jean-Marie Le Pen. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Politics has changed so much, and we have seen that people are prepared to jump, and that if they are prepared to jump and they suddenly think our country is better served by having this kind of immigrant skeptic, NATO skeptic, Russia friendly person as the leader, then we've seen vast shifts of public opinion in a very short space of time. And I think the kind of thing that, again, the pollsters keep getting surprised by these, hadn't seen that coming.
Exactly.
We hadn't predicted that.
I was talking to somebody who's sort of quite close to the administration, who was saying, look, we had warnings about it. When it was Slovakia, we were kind of on it. When it was, Germany and the AfD, we were on it. This guy has kind of come from nowhere with a very strong TikTok following. Again, it is the power of social media in this kind of election to bring people out from places that none of the pollsters, none of the traditional politicians have seen coming. And I guess we should throw forward to the election in Ireland on Friday, right? Which is happening on our doorstep, which for ages has been basically a two-party question, hasn't it? Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, who have actually been in coalition together, and we're just talking about who kind of dominates in that sphere. But now that could change too?
I think the Ireland election is one of the most interesting ones. And Emily, you and I were both in Dublin on Friday. I think what's so interesting about it is that what we have seen in successive elections around the world is the massive anti-incumbency factor. Yeah. If you're the ruler, chances are you're going to be booted out. You're hated and going to be booted out on your arse. In Ireland, it's kind of, Sinn Féin was making enormous progress a year ago, but has stumbled and tripped a bit. But again, the polls are telling you that it may be that in Ireland, the incumbency factor doesn't work against you.
They've also got the People Before Profit Party now. Sinead Cusack's son, I think, is representing that party.
There are a lot of independent parties.
There's lots of independents. And there's also a big problem, which I think Fine Gael it loses a lot of its incumbents this time round. So you're going to have lots and lots of new faces, which may make it harder, to get elected because people aren't sort of voting for the person they know, the sort of community representative that they've had before.
Yeah, and Ireland votes on Friday, and we'll be watching that very closely. The Irish are really worried about what Britain thinks. They're really worried about what it's going to mean for the relationship with a Trump presidency. They're really worried about
housing.
And they're really worried about housing internally as well. And hopefully we'll have a result of that this weekend.
Now, funny you mentioned the weekend, because on Sunday we might just be able to bring you the Irish election result live from the Albert Hall.
Are we doing the Royal Albert Hall?
We are doing it. We are doing the Royal Albert Hall.
I'm playing the Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah, John is going to play, air guitar?
I might, even worse, more dangerous would be if I brought a real guitar.
I would love that. I would love that.
I'm not going to.
You're allowed to play for 45 minutes.
Oh my God.
Can I just say for the record now,
Stairway to Heaven, 45 seconds is as much as I can do.
That's right. I've suggested to my companions that we do a flash mob dance with the audience. So far, they have not taken me up on this, but
You must be bloody
we have
joking.
a week to make this work.
We're not going to.
Do send in your questions, actually. Send in your questions to us for
please.
Q&A, not about the flash mob, but about anything you want to ask. And we will be coming to find you in the audience with your questions.
So email us in your questions now, if you wouldn't mind. And
If they mind, they won't do it.
I'm just being polite.
Yes, you are.
Politeness, there's no cost to being polite.
No cost.
Bloody hell, she's so rude. The email address is newsagents@global.com. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.